Now I'm live. See, it says you're live.
It would have found its way there.
I'm dead until it says I'm live. All right, we're here.
That's a country song.
Are we on? We ready?
We're on.
We're ready. Hello. Well, welcome to the Weekly. I am Dan Cavallari, slow guy on the fast ride, with my co-host Mark Still. Mark, how are you?
Well, how are you doing, Dan?
I'm doing pretty well.
Let's talk some bike stuff.
Let's do that. So, the week in bikes has been a little bit quiet because everybody's sort of at their training camps, gearing up, getting ready for the season. And so, funny enough, one of the bigger stories of the week has been about Netflix. So, I don't know if you've watched it yet, but the Movistar team has, I think they're 2 seasons into it now. They've had a Netflix special called El Día Menos Pensado, or The Least Expected Day. I've watched the 2 seasons. It is very dramatic. It's quite good, actually. It's pretty fun. It's a great little look behind the curtain of a pro team. And one of the things that just happened, they had the Movistar had their team presentation, and they showed a preview for the season 3. And in season 3, they actually finally talk about Miguel Lopez's very strange exit from the Vuelta a España in 2021.
Very abrupt.
Very abrupt, where he just basically said, I'm done.
I mean, he got off his bike, but that was it. After that, he was gone.
He just left.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you know, he basically just says, I'm stopping here. And the funny thing is now they've made it a hashtag, I'm stopping here. And Lopez was making fun of it too, because he's now on Astana, and so he was on a training ride, and he just posted a picture of himself on Instagram, said, I'm stopping here.
Did he ever explain himself?
No, and that's the thing is the TV show is going to basically give us that answer of what actually happened. Yeah. I've watched both seasons. It's fun. It's interesting. That is a very dramatic team, apparently. I don't know if every UCI World Tour team is like that, but it's a lot of drama.
Well, the same Spanish passion that results in exciting racing.
True.
You know, and we had an analogous event in American sport. Antonio Brown lost his mind in the middle of a football game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yeah. Stripped off his gear and waved to the crowd, and
I'm out.
That was that.
Yeah. So, yeah, you know, I think if you're going to make an exit like that, it definitely helps to just tear off clothing. Yeah. I mean, maybe Miguel Lopez can learn.
He can learn a little bit because I think Antonio's potential for great memes is much greater.
Yes,
so
that's true.
It worked out well.
Yeah, I would say this is an interesting turn of events because it really does place the focus on how teams have to capitalize on social media and telling the story to sort of make a loyal following again. I mean, you know, UCI, World Tour racing can get a little stale, and this is a good way for them to sort of humanize the riders and tell stories that we don't see on TV.
Yeah, and if you're a geek about the processes of things and how large events and teams and groups of people work, it's kind of cool to see behind the scenes how they manage all of that equipment and the people and how many people it really takes to pull off something like that.
It'd be interesting to see in season 3 too how, you know, with COVID and having to manage COVID through such a bizarre season, and cycling is such a unique beast in that way. You know, there's no way to get away from fans at some point and get away from those crowds. I mean, so it'd be interesting to see how they handle that too. I'm looking forward to watching.
And on the continent, I mean, it's one thing to have. Here in the States, we cross state lines, but I mean, they're having to work and race in completely different countries on a regular basis. And I think France has a mandate on vaccination before professional athletes can enter. And again, across sports and tennis, Djokovic has been in kind of hot water for his stance on that stuff. So it's complicated.
Yeah, and Peter Sagan's gotten COVID twice, so he should probably get vaccinated at this point.
I think he did, but I don't. You know, I just don't think vaccines aren't a bulletproof vest.
Sure.
They're help. So I think it's been complicated for that.
Speaking of the upcoming season, the UCI Worlds is going to be in Wollongong, which is just fun to say.
Easy for you to say.
No, it's not easy for me to say at all. In Australia. And the route is super long. Yeah. It's supposed to be 275 kilometers, which is the longest I can think of, except for Yorkshire, which was supposed to be longer than that, but then got shortened for rain. You know, we have this conversation about long races all the time. Who's served by this? You know, making these races so long. I mean, is that last 25 added kilometers really going to be the difference maker? And is that serving the fans? I don't think so.
Who's watching?
Right.
Because, I mean, most TV coverage, certainly here that we can see, it's a couple hours in before they start. Is anybody are any fans on the road in the first 50, 100K watching that?
I think there's, I mean, having
and
been
what are
to,
they watching?
Having been to a lot of races, I can tell you that there's a lot of people right at the start.
Sure.
And then there's nobody for a very long time. And you know, you go through a lot of towns and villages, and I think that's part of it, is that you get to expose the racing to a lot of people along the route. So in that sense, it's great. But you know, in terms of viewership and interest in racing, there's gaps of several hours where there's just not much happening, and I'm just not sure that cycling in general is served by such a long course. I mean, we talk about this with Milano Sanremo every year.
Yeah, 300 plus K.
Yeah, and the last 15 minutes are interesting. You know, those last 15 minutes are fantastic, but you got to sit there for how long just to get to that point? I don't know who's served by that. Yeah. I'd be interested to hear from race organizers to see what the reasoning is behind that. You know?
Well, it always comes down to money.
Yeah.
I think there's some traditional part of cycling. Some of those races are very, very old.
Yeah.
And you don't want to give that up. But these days it comes down to money. There must be something, like you said, about going to the towns where they're charging those towns for that privilege. Mm-hmm. Something, but the racers can't like it. I mean, some of the worst crashes happen in those early hours where they just can't bother to pay attention.
Right.
It's terrible. And then on the other side of the scale, we've got women's racing, where they're for some reason making these races short. When that's some great racing I'd like to see another 50K of.
Sure. Well, you're in luck, because the women's Worlds is going to be 174 kilometers, which is pretty stout for a women's course. That's pretty good. I kind of feel like that's where it should be.
Bring the men's race back to that, and we're all happy.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is a fine line between going long for the sake of challenging the athletes and then going too long just to make a boring race.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, maybe the Wollongong course is super interesting all the way through. I don't know, but I can certainly tell you I'm probably not going to watch all 7 hours.
I can't imagine
of that race.
The only race I will sit through end to end, some of the classics, I will sit and watch whatever they give us.
Which is what we did this year.
We did, yeah. And I'm fine even if it's just quiet. I don't necessarily need commentary.
Right.
But yeah, it's awful long.
Yeah.
It's awful long.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, part of the reason I like to watch races in general is to see the scenery and the locales, and so you get some of that. But for 7 hours, I don't know.
And look, if it's just a matter of, for something like San Remo, we want the right mix of riders, and so if it's 100K shorter, there's going to be a lot of more pure sprinters left.
Right.
Well, that's fine. What we'll do is before every race, we'll have them get on Zwift. They can do 2 hours on Zwift.
Yeah.
They don't bother anybody.
Right.
We don't have to watch. They get tired out, and then they start to race.
I like that.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. So in preparation for all of these wonderful races, teams right now are in their training camps, a lot in Spain, a lot in southern locales where it's nice and warm. Team Ineos this week had a very close call where a driver just crossed the double yellows coming straight at them. The riders didn't even flinch. And that says a lot about where we are in terms of road safety in not only in just this country, in the world. I mean, car culture really poses a danger, and it doesn't matter if you're a pro. We're all at risk for this. And to me, that's really frightening, that we place such emphasis on cars as the primary mode of transportation that we're willing to accept these close calls as normal. And I think that's why this made news this week. I mean, I looked at the video and I saw the car cross the yellow lines, and I'm like, uh-oh, that's not good. But then he got back over and nobody flinched, and I'm like, if I was on that group ride, I probably wouldn't have flinched either, because I've had so many calls that are closer than that.
I can't tell you, when I saw the video, the sound was off. Yeah. And I just watched it and I went, I don't understand what the thing is.
Right.
And then I read and listened, and it's a close call. I went, I guess it was close.
Yeah.
That kind of scared myself. I mean, if that's my opinion of that, how many times have I done that and went, oh, well, whatever.
Right. And, recently Alex Howes and Kiel Reinen were with Phil Guyman in California, and they had an even closer call, which honestly, that'll send chills down your spine to watch that one. That to me is alarming on a lot of levels, and it's a systemic problem, that we've talked about a lot. But the fact that we're getting inured to it is bothersome to me.
Yeah.
Aside from that, there's other crashes happening.
I know, and there's a lot of impactful crashes happening in pro cycling.
Yeah, and so Nacer Bouhanni crashed in a training ride. They didn't say how he crashed, why he crashed, but they did say that he lost consciousness briefly. And this is on the heels of other training crashes we've heard about recently, notably Amy Peters, who really was in a coma. I mean, the question for me is, has racing come to a point where riders are training so hard and racing so hard and making so many aggressive decisions that they're becoming more of a danger to themselves and others in the peloton, both in races and on training rides? I mean, I don't know what happened to Bouhanni to cause this crash, and certainly not to Amy Peters, but I feel like we're seeing more training crashes like this.
It seems like, and even Chris Froome's, near career-ending crash, it may actually have ended his career. He's just too famous to, be put out when he should. But that was a training crash. Right. So, as your question, is it gotten so hyper-competitive and aggressive that even in training that's coming up through that? Right. It's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, and it's no doubt that the peloton has become faster, more aggressive, and I forget who said it, but somebody just recently, a pro racer, a former pro, was quoted as saying something to the effect of like, racing has become less artful essentially and just more aggressive. And I'm sure that's reflected in the training, right? You have to learn how to take those risks and handle your bike differently. So I wonder if that just is a reflection of how racing has become.
Yeah, and it's not a switch being flipped. And so I can imagine that there's some first, second, third year pros, they're coming into the World Tour, they want to prove themselves, and that's the environment they come into. Yeah. And look, it trickles down, just like there's the idiot dude on the group ride that wants to go for every city limit sign. I'm sure that same kind of mentality is I got to show the bosses. Because I mean, they're not
like you were pointing at me on that.
They're not huge teams, but there's a limited rate schedule. Certainly in the COVID era, they have less opportunity. So maybe they're just trying to prove things. Yeah. With Nacer Bouhanni, there's no telling. It didn't mention he could have just gotten in a fight.
It's true.
Ex-boxer, wouldn't be the first time he got in a fight about something, so it could have been that he got in a fight and fell off his bike.
We don't know.
We don't know. Yeah. It's hard to say.
But we talked about it, last time we had the weekly, which was 2 weeks ago because somebody had to go to Disney World. Lucky you. But we talked about how it's becoming harder and harder for young riders to sort of crack into the peloton and make a name for themselves. And how do you do that? I mean, a lot of it is social media, a lot of it is becoming that personality, but some of it too can be just having that big moment in the peloton or in the race. And the racing has gotten more aggressive. People are taking more risks to do that. So,
have you? There was a suggestion a couple of years ago that part of the reason we're seeing more crashes, at least during the races, is bike geometry itself. That we've gotten, because of the UCI regulations on bike weights and the way geometry rules are, that a guy our size, 5'11", 6 foot's riding a 52 centimeter bike with a 140 millimeter stem and a negative 17 degree thing, and they actually can't look up anymore. Yeah. Is there anything to that, or how that affects the handling? They got 40 millimeters of saddle offset. They got 140 millimeter stem. They're outside the. Do you think there's anything to that causing some of this stuff?
It's possible, but I would say, when, like, for example, when the disc brake debate was happening, I guess technically it still is. I don't know why, but what the pros said was, now I'm just going to brake later in corners. That's really all. I mean, to them it was just like, now it just lets me go faster into corners, which in itself is very dangerous. And that's why we leave it to the pros, right? So, as technology changes, so does the handling of the bike, so does the pros' use of that bike. So, it's possible. I don't know that that's necessarily causing crashes, the geometry. It certainly lets them get into more aggressive positions. Smaller frames, too. Sprinters often use smaller frames because it's stiffer, right? You don't have as much tubing to flex. So that was part of the reason that they always use smaller frames. But I don't know, maybe that does. It puts your weight further over the front wheel and that causes some instability. I don't know, but to me, it's been a long time since I've ridden a bike that was in any way unstable. They're all so dialed. But then again,
I'm riding the correct size bike.
Yeah, I'm riding the size I should be riding.
If I put you on a 48 or 50 centimeter bike and drag a stem out that long, I don't think it works that way anymore.
Well, what does affect handling and has always kind of scared me is as bikes get super, super light, it becomes easier for the wheels to come off the ground, like when you're really wrenching on it.
We see a lot of crashes in feed zones. And in the past, we've had the cables for shifting and braking that help hold the wheel straight.
Right.
And when you're moving, it's not that big a deal, but they slow down for a musette, they slow down for something. There's nothing anymore with, especially SRAM wireless, there's nothing holding that steering wheel in check. If you hit a little pebble, maybe that's more, I don't know.
I mean, that might be making drama where there's no drama. I don't know. Maybe I think riders are just being more aggressive. I mean,
they're definitely,
and they will use whatever tools they have.
Well, is it? I don't know. So it's hard to call somebody like Sean Kelly not aggressive, but I do think that where 30 years ago there were the handful of stars we knew were going to do those things. Now there's 200 people in a race that feel like they got to make that point. I think it's probably kind of like the cure for a disease. It's not one thing.
Right.
There are a ton of little things that are adding up to these crashes that continue to happen. And look, the one thing that hasn't changed is they're riding around in essentially their underwear with a little styrofoam helmet. Yeah. It helps.
Well, I'll be the dad of the Peloton. Be careful.
Be careful out there. Yeah. Be careful out there.
Flipping to the complete opposite end of the spectrum on the not race side at all.
Yes.
Just yesterday, Cannondale launched their new Synapse, which is right over here. You can't see it, but it's over yonder. And it's got fully integrated, maybe you can't. Look at that. You can see it, I think. Wait.
Let's see.
Can we see it? We're going to try some new camera tricks here on the Weekly.
There it is.
There it is. Just got this in for testing. I'm going to do a Let Me See That video on it very soon. If you haven't checked out our Let Me See That videos, please do go to slowguyonthefastride.com and click on Let Me See That. This is an interesting bike because we talked about road safety earlier in the show with Ineos having that close call. What do we do to make roads safer? Cannondale has a vested interest in this conversation because they want to sell more road bikes. I mean, we don't want road to die. They say road isn't dead. It's just changing. Mm-hmm. The Synapse seems to be a response to that. Now, this bike has integrated lights, an integrated
rear
radar system. I blanked on the name. A radar system, and basically this is making it so all you have to do is walk up to the bike, get on the bike, the lights turn on, the lights do what they're supposed to do, they flash at the right level, the radar system indicates when a car is approaching you. It is integrating all the things that as a bike industry we have developed to improve safety. Mm-hmm. Is that enough? Is that something, I mean, can we do more as an industry besides just having technology to warn us that a car is coming?
Yeah, or is it even a bike you want to ride with that stuff on?
Right.
The rear radar piece is based on Garmin's Vario technology. Mm-hmm. I rode with that early on. I think that's something I probably would get used to.
Sure.
For instance, we got a new car recently that's got the cruise control that keeps the distance.
Yeah.
At first that was weird, now it's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
That could be the same, but initially when I rode that, I think I felt less safe.
Yeah.
Knowing those cars were coming. It's
right.
You said, ignorance was bliss.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to know when that's about to happen.
What bothers me about it, and again, I haven't even ridden this bike yet. I'm interested to see over time how my opinion of it changes. But one of the things with Vario that bothered me was that I would hear that indication that a car was approaching, and it would be fine. Nothing happens. But then I've got the monkey brain. I'm thinking about what could have happened.
Yeah. Or what does that do to distract you from looking where you're going?
Sure. Yeah. So I think there's definitely arguments to be made on both sides of this. Like, yes, it's enhanced features that can help you be more aware of your surroundings, aware of what's coming to you, mm-hmm. And with the lights indicating to drivers that you're there. But frankly, I think the bigger issue here is how do we change car culture, and is lights and a radar going to save us when car culture is so predominant? I don't know. I'm interested to ride this bike. It looks like a cool bike. I like the features. I've been playing with the app. It's neat. I'm going to do some videos on it, so we'll see.
Yeah, I went through the frame geometry. I love what they've done to pull it back from being such a race-oriented bike. Mm-hmm. And I'm a technology person, so I have a feeling I'll get used to that and come mm-hmm. to expect that kind of technology. It'll be fun to figure that part out.
Yeah, and on top of that, it's got some clearance for huge tires, so you can get off the pavement too if you want to.
Yeah, and nobody ever sends you like the down spec bikes to play with. It's always the nice stuff.
It really is, and but I think that's going to change soon. Part of it is because it's actually hard to get that stuff right now.
Yeah.
But you know, hopefully in the near future, I mean, one of my goals is to test stuff that people will actually buy. You know, not the Halo product. So.
No kidding. Good stuff.
Cross your fingers. Well, thanks for joining us today. And of course, go to slowguyandthefastride.com to check out all the cool content we're producing. Follow us on the social medias, at slowguyfastride on Twitter, which is where I do my finest work, and at slowguyonthefastride on Instagram, where I'm a little bit lazy but need to post more photos. And of course, visit the YouTube channel, give some thumbs ups. We always appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mark, thanks for joining me today.
I enjoyed it, Dan. Thank you.
Well, guys, we'll catch you next week.